What's up, Big 12 Nation? It is Tuesday night in America. That can mean only one thing. It's time for another edition of your favorite Big 12 YouTube show, The Biggest 12, with me, your host, Clint Foster. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We got a fantastic show for you. We're going to talk through my personal top 10 Big 12 games of 2023. We'll also take a look at games that I feel like every single one of y'all should rewatch for your teams this summer. If you're a degenerate like me, you love to rewatch games on YouTube while you're pining for football, pining for NCAA 25. I got just the antidote for you. We're going to talk through that. And I got a couple of great guests for you. It's going to be a fantastic show. I'm glad you're here. We're going to talk about all of these teams behind me. So, plenty of love to go around. If you haven't already, subscribe to the show. What are you doing? We're trying to grow this thing, okay? I want you to tell your aunts and uncles and your grandmas and your grandpas and your moms and dads and everybody. Knock on doors, grow the show, subscribe at Big 12 Voice of College Football right there. Hit the like button, the bell, all the things. It's not just the biggest 12 on this channel. We got all sorts of great content, stuff that you won't want to miss. And the only way that you're going to make sure you see all of it is if you subscribe. Also, as always, follow me on Twitter at Clint_Foster55 and follow my YouTube channel, which is sure to be much busier now that we are pulling our way. I'm crawling my way towards summer out of another spring semester. Should have a lot more videos for you soon at Clint Foster Comedy on YouTube, at Clint_Foster55 on Twitter. So without further ado, let me introduce my guests to y'all because I'm super hyped to have one of them back on the show, one of them on the show for the first time. Ladies and gentlemen, Brittany Rose and Shahan Jayaraja. Friends, so good to see you. Waffles is in the video as well. Oh, we're going to have a great show. How are you two doing?
Good. I'm good. Got waffles. It's a Tuesday. Excited to talk football. Miss football. Look forward to the season starting.
Yeah, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me back.
Yes. Okay, so Shahan, a couple of things for you really quick because I was hoping to get you on for Baylor Night, and Baylor Night ended up being a little bit of a disaster. So I got a serious question for you.
I watched Baylor last year. I understand.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was very par for the course, I felt like. So two things for you. One, a serious question and then a funny question. Then we'll get into our top 10s. First of all, is there any reason, I mean, you're a Baylor alum, now you're a national college football writer for CBS. Is there any reason to be optimistic, excited about Baylor football heading into 2024?
It's interesting, right? I think that when you look at what's happened since Dave Aranda was brought back, which I didn't expect, I thought that he was going to get let go. I mean, the indicators have been good. They were able to nab some assistant coaches that were pretty highly regarded. Keenan Hall from SMU was one who really did not need to leave the job that he was in. Jake Spavital had a great first year at Cal. And then from a player acquisition perspective, you had 2 top 40 guys on the offensive line. You had the MAC player of the year in DeQuan Finn. So I don't think it's going to be as bad as it was last year. And I also think that there really wasn't much explanation for it being as bad as it was last year with the roster that they had. So look, I mean, I think that having reason for optimism is they could be back in a bowl game, not hey, they're going to compete for the conference. But once you go 3-9, I think that's got to be something you're excited about.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I mean, does the Gary Patterson hire raise an eyebrow for you? Do you think that's gonna? I mean, I don't know if you saw, they did cancel their spring game, so already they're in Gary Patterson form.
The weirdest thing for me has been how quickly Baylor people have ridden with it, how quickly they've just been yeah, he's just gonna help. I think that and look, Gary's obviously one of the greatest coaches of all time, a Hall of Famer, no doubt about it. He got a lot of credit for Texas becoming okay in Steve Sarkisian's second year, and I think he did help, but boy did he get a lot of credit for fixing that defense with the defense that didn't look very much like a Gary Patterson defense. So I think a lot of Baylor people are well, Gary's just going to do that to Baylor too. He's going to make us into Texas. And it's, I don't know exactly if it's going to work like that. It was very weird to see him playing the guitar at a Baylor NIL event. That has to be the weirdest thing that I've seen this offseason. But I do think that, to talk just sincerely about the football part, Dave Aranda brought Gary Patterson in because they are philosophically on the field not alike. And I think that Dave Aranda loves the idea of being challenged. And if there's one person who's going to sit in a room and challenge you, it's probably Gary Patterson.
No, that is true. That is true. Dave Aranda, an insanely likable guy to me, right? He's one of those guys, kind of like Matt Rule. But Baylor keeps hiring these likable coaches, and I'm like, y'all gotta stop doing that. You're making it too hard for me to continue to hate
I don't know. I didn't like
that
what happened before that. I'm going to stick with the likable if that's all right with y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one last question, and this is for both of y'all before we get into the meat of what we're talking about. I saw this and immediately thought of all of my Baylor brethren out there. Would either of y'all ever drink Dr. Pepper wine? This guy is making Dr. Pepper wine out here on TikTok, right? He's adding yeast to it, letting it marinate for several, I don't know, days, weeks, whatever. Would you ever try Dr. Pepper wine?
Honestly, maybe. Can't be that bad.
I mean, but like, I feel like that's kind of where it's like, oh, well, could you do it as like a dare? Like, what's the point? What is the payoff of trying it? I mean, like, would I? Yeah, would I like physically try it? I mean, okay, I guess, but like, why would I choose to do that? That is I'll tell you what. I think the internet's gone too far. It's time to pull back.
Also, did they just dump honey in it?
So yeah, he's talking about. So he's also made Mountain Dew wine, which did not turn out very good apparently. But he was explaining how like basically when you add sugar to pretty much anything and yeast, you can ferment it and turn it into alcohol. So he's like, well, I'm going to try it with several sodas, right? And the Dr. Pepper wine. See, I'm a regular American, right? I'm an adult. I watch TikToks a month later on Instagram, right? Like a real adult. I don't have TikTok. But, you know, I've seen these come across my reels on Instagram, and there's a whole series of them. And so I just immediately was like, I got to ask a Baylor person about Dr. Pepper wine. But yeah, I think you're right, Sean. Like, what is the payoff here? What do I get if I try Dr. Pepper wine? Okay. Yeah, Clint Moses, open a nice bottle of Dr. Pepper wine. Next thing you know, one thing leads to another. That's probably true. Okay. So we're going to get into this top 10 now. And I should issue a disclaimer out there. The top 10 games on my top 10 game list, I'm looking for games that spark joy, right? So there will be no Texas wins on this list.
Where's
he wants to talk about
TCU Colorado on there? Is that an oversight or?
You know, that again, that's it's my show and I can do what I want, right? That's what that's about. Also, like, I don't know. I mean, I feel about that game how you feel about another game on this list where I'm like, that wasn't fun for me. Like, I didn't enjoy watching that game at all. 3 interceptions in the red zone. That was not an enjoyable thing to watch. But yeah, we're not going to see Texas beating Kansas State in overtime on here. We're not going to see Texas squeaking by against TCU, right? That doesn't spark joy. It's my list. This is America. I'm going to do what I want. But that being said, did either of y'all think that there were any major oversights in my list before we get into it? Any honorable mentions from you?
You had the games that I really was going to put on mine. So honestly, I think you did a good job.
No, I think again with the understanding that you're not putting very many Texas or Oklahoma games on here, right? Because like Red River,
this is a hater show.
Yeah, this is a hater show. No,
I
mean I do
spark joy.
I do think that that the hilarity of Red River in terms of a like against Texas thing was still very funny. So I do think that still is one that could have even in the hater category made the list. But overall, I mean. The other one too is like these are of course the good spark joy ones, but like there's also the whole like, wait, why did UCF just beat Oklahoma State 45-3? Right? Like I think that there's a place for maybe like a legitimate sort of like rubbernecking on the highway sort of game, and I don't think that we necessarily have that kind of game on here.
Yeah. Well, I will give you one honorable mention that I was very, very close to putting into my top 10 just because of the hilarity of it, the college football-ness of it. That will be the TCU Texas Tech game from this last year, the possum game, right, where the possum gets loose on the field. Was a very tightly contested game. at the end of the day, I thought our number 10 game was a little more exciting. But what were y'all's thoughts on the possum game? Is that a glaring omission, do you think?
The possum game sparked all of Texas Tech and animals, so I love the possum game because first came the possum, then came waffles. So it should have been included.
Waffles, our resident Texas Tech fan, by the way, on this show. All right. Okay, well, let's get into the list, shall we? Number 10 on my list. I have Texas Tech versus Kansas. This was a buzzer beater game where Texas Tech kicks a field goal as time expires. I'm trying to get up some highlights for us here so we can recall. What do y'all remember about this game? What are y'all's thoughts on this game?
I remember watching this game with my dog and being very depressed. It should not have happened.
Yeah, but he was happy, right?
He was thrilled, but you know what? We can never be happy on the same day. So
it was just such a weird game. That's what I remember most about it. Is it was just like, I mean, because this was one of the ones that's like Cole Ballard played a lot, right? Like this was just this just felt like a game where both teams were having an out of body experience, where neither of them could do anything interesting. Neither of them knew what they like wanted to do. And ultimately, like, again, Kansas, they went scoreless for 3 quarters, if I remember right, and then stormed back. And by the way, they're number 16 in the country at this point when this game is going on. And Texas Tech is like hoping to make a bowl game. So this just felt like, I mean, the word that comes to mind is like an anxiety bowl, but it's not that exactly. It just, I think that this probably is in the rubbernecking category, right? Of like, why is this happening? What's going on? I do remember talking to somebody on Texas Tech staff before this game, and he was kind of like, no, don't worry. We're going to make a bowl. We're going to win this game and make a bowl. I'm like, all right. Let's. And then they come out and they completely like hold their heads underwater, and just such a bizarre game.
It was a game that Kansas shouldn't have lost at all. And it was one of those where you get to that point in the season and you're like, I feel like somehow they're going to throw away one of these games away stupidly because they have to. I mean, it's like a requirement. Like Kansas and Iowa State they both have requirements of losing some dumb game that should never be lost at the end of the season. And I think this was that for Kansas.
Yeah, you definitely got to like field goals if you're going to enjoy this game. And just, I don't think that even if you're a Texas Tech fan, you'd ever want to rewatch this game again for fun. It's just like Jahan said, like no one's doing anything right. And it's not even like, oh man, this is great defense. It's just like a whole lot of ineptitude on display. But I mean, hey, who doesn't love a buzzer beater, right? I mean, this is a basketball conference at the end of the day. We got a buzzer beater field goal at the end of this one. I mean, that's exciting, I think, right?
Sure. Yes. I love me some.
Sure. I guess. All right. So, well, for the sake of me making my point, let's get ourselves to the buzzer beater field goal. It also is crazy to me that Texas Tech was able to do this on the road against Kansas. It's not like Kansas is like an insane atmosphere, but this is the sort of wild thing you'd expect to happen in Lubbock, I would think. Yeah. There it is, right there.
It is. It's definitely like, this does feel, like you said, like a maybe mid 2010s Lubbocking, but the fact that it happened in Lawrence does I think make it kind of a unique game.
I think the best part too is while he's kicking the field goal, you just see Big J's eyes staring back at him.
Yes. Okay, so that's our number 10. Moving on to number 9. We're going to keep it in the state of Kansas for the Sunflower Showdown of 2023. There was a lot of hype around this game. Maybe the most hyped up Sunflower Showdown we've seen, and God knows how long. People are wondering if Kansas is finally going to break the streak and get that coveted win against Kansas State. But alas and alack, it did not occur for the Jayhawks. Let's talk memories of this game, y'all.
Is it starting to feel like bullying at this point?
It's going to get better. It's going to get better, Brittany, I promise.
This game was so painful. I thought Kansas was going to do it. I really, really, really did. And then when they screwed it up at the end, it was depressing. This was one of those games where you turned off, you went to bed, and you never wanted to speak of it ever again.
No, just the stakes around this game, of course. Like you said, both teams at this point very much alive for a spot in the Big 12 title game. Like it was just brutal. It was just brutal for Kansas to kind of lose it the way that they did. And again, it's just one of those games too where you're just like, Kansas has two really good quarterbacks and neither of them can play in this humongous game that could change the program. I mean, and they come out with like the weirdo jerseys that they had, the black jerseys. Like it felt like everything was coming in line for this to be a day that they remember forever. And unfortunately, many will for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and that was the thing too. It's impressive that even with their third string, they did that game was as close as it was. Definitely. And by the way, those black jerseys are not weirdo jerseys. They're very, very, very cool jerseys.
I kind of dig them. I kind of dig them. I know the blackout trend is kind of old at this point, but I don't know. I think they're kind of cool.
I don't mind the black. It's like the combo of everything. It's like that with like the giant Jayhawk on the side. Like it looks like sort of like a child's drawing of a football jersey. And I don't mean that in like a negative. I just mean that in like a sort of bizarro world type way.
Well, this was, unlike our number 10 game, this was a lot more of a kind of traditional Big 12 game, if you will, and that there's a lot of scoring. I mean, when y'all are looking at a game that's memorable and a game that you really enjoy watching, do you prefer a defensive struggle or do you prefer more high scoring, lots of points?
High scoring, good offensive game.
I think for me, if it's a good defensive game, it really has to be a good defensive game, right? Like I look at a game, even back to like the Kansas Texas Tech game, it gets knocked down a little bit for me because like the quarterback play was really bad for Kansas in that game, right? And so I think it's a little different when you go into a game. I mean, just to even obviously, I'm a Baylor guy. Like I remember back to like the 2021 season when Baylor plays Oklahoma. And Oklahoma had been running through everybody with Caleb Williams. And then it was just like, holy crap. It's just like nothing's happening, but you know that it's because they're playing well, right? So I think you can feel when it's bad offense versus good defense. And so a good defense game, I think, can be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So we're coming up on the game winner here for Kansas State. I'll actually fast forward it a little bit here. I was trying to time these out perfectly, but you can only do so much. So here we go. Kansas State had to come back from down. What was it? 2 scores, Brittany? Is that what happened?
It was a lot.
Yeah. And there you go. Will Howard getting it in there in the fourth quarter. Yeah. I mean, worthy of a number 9. I think, honestly, if Kansas had won the game in the exact same scenario, I think I would have bumped it up higher just because of the, what that would mean, right? And the stakes.
Totally.
But, hey, okay, Kansas State won for the, whatever time in a row. Like, okay. But, I felt like it deserved to be on the list. Okay. So moving on, number 8. And this is one, as I was doing my research, I was actually kind of surprised that I ended up ranking it as low as I did. But the last Bedlam game, Oklahoma State beating OU in, who knows, maybe the last Bedlam game ever. This was a wild one and obviously came down to a controversial call at the end. Let's talk Bedlam, y'all.
I think from my perspective, yeah, I would definitely have it a little higher than you have it just because of the combination of the way that it finished. And like you said, I think the fact that there's a controversial call at the end, like makes it even better. Like, I think that it makes it something that you'll talk about for like the next 20 years. And I think the other piece too, right? Like the stakes around it, not just in terms of being the final Bedlam game, of course, being a game that ended up deciding a spot in the conference championship game.
That's true.
Everybody was like, oh, well, it's going to be Texas, Oklahoma. They're going to rematch. Obviously, Oklahoma's really good. And Oklahoma State, this team that got crushed by South Alabama at the beginning of the year, that went on to lose that game against UCF, like I mentioned. Because of this game, they kept Oklahoma out of the Big 12 title game. And also, by the way, out of the New Year's Six. Like, they don't make the New Year's Six because of this football game. And so...
kiss.
Well, and I think that when you talk about the actual on-field of it, this was one of those extreme bend don't break defense situations, right? Where Oklahoma State's offense, you just felt at the end like, ugh. After that last touchdown, they're like, I don't know, man. I don't know if they got it. You look at their last 3 drives, right? It's 4 plays, 3 yards. It's 6 plays, 32 yards. It's 5 plays, 29 yards. Like, they did not have it. They did not have another scoring drive in them. It was totally on their defense to try to ride this one out, and they were able to do it. And again, especially in a year where Oklahoma State wasn't all that good on defense, I mean, I think that made it one of the most exciting, and I'm sure for Oklahoma fans, most frustrating games of the season.
Oh yeah, you know that Oklahoma fans are never going to let this one go, right? that this was stolen from them and all that. I mean, Brittany, what do you think about this game?
I'm happy that Oklahoma State got the internal scoreboard. That makes me happy for them. Obviously, I want to see as many OU and Texas losses as possible. I hated that such an important game came down to a controversial call. I would have liked to see Oklahoma State just flat out win it instead of it being kind of like, well, technically, should Oklahoma have won? So...
Yeah, see, I can really see both sides of the argument there, right? Like, so Shahan, I really understand what you're saying about like, oh, it's because of the controversial call that you'd put it higher. But for me, that was actually one of the main reasons that I ranked it lower, right? Kind of like what Brittany was saying, because it kind of feels like, oh, they kind of got away with one there. I'm trying to see if it's actually on this highlight.
Well, I'll say this, right? Like, I mean, going back, sorry to keep bringing up Baylor stuff, but obviously it's very relevant to me. People still tell me, hey, that pass interference call on Kevin White in 2014 in the 61-58 game, that was garbage. That shouldn't have happened.
Oh,
and like,
yeah.
And like, I think that people still, if it's just like, oh, well, like, the good team won the game. Like, I think that again, adds a level of conversation. It adds a level of anger. Like, Oklahoma can never do anything about it ever again. Right. And so I think if it went the other direction, right, if a controversial call, like with the Kansas State game, if that ended up costing the cool upset, then I think that would suck. But I think for something dumb like that to happen and the underdog win, I think that's something that people like. I think it makes it more enjoyable.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was for some reason that is not on these highlights. That's very bizarre.
They didn't want to include it.
I guess not. This is the ESPN highlight, so I don't know.
They don't want to show. They don't want to show up the refs.
I guess so. I guess not. It was weird because they had another pass interference no call in there, just not the one. Well, anyway, so moving right along. Here's your first Baylor mention on the list. I mean, this game was a wild one. Baylor coming back to beat UCF. What were they down 28 points, Sean? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think it was 28-0, maybe 27-0, something like that.
I mean, hey, it's no Alamo Bowl against Oregon, but that's pretty impressive. It's insane. Here we go. UCF blows 35-7 lead for this Baylor victory. A little Fiesta Bowl revenge, if you will, from 2013.
This game was great.
Yeah, this one was absolutely insane. I actually, for me, I'm on college football Saturdays, right? I have 6 games oftentimes up at a time, and when Baylor's on, I try to put them just like in the corner. Especially this last year, obviously they weren't on my main screen for most of college football Saturdays. But this, I think this was an ESPN Plus game, and I just had it in the corner, and then I'm like, this is the stupidest game. And then they start coming back, and all of a sudden it's a closed game. And I'm like, I just call my wife over. I'm like, hey, you want to watch the end of this with me? And we got like the volume on full blast when the McLean call happens on 4th down, and it's just. It was so dumb. It was so pointless. Like, UCF was so much better than Baylor last year, and I just don't. It's just one of those again where you're just like, huh, that happened.
Right? Yeah. You said it right. It's kind of wild. I mean, let it never be said that I don't enjoy watching Baylor lose, but there was something so delicious about this game. I think just the amount of chirping that UCF fans did on Twitter leading up to this point. Yeah, I mean, it's very, very delicious, and for them to lose in the way that they did.
That was kind of my next point. I think it was a very humbling experience for UCF. I mean, they kind of came in the conference being like, we have our undefeated national title. We're better than the Big 12. We deserve to be here automatically, right? And then they come to this game, they're up by 1,000,000 points. They all leave their own stadium. It's a home game. And then they lose. And you know what?
Yeah.
I like my UCF friends, but I also enjoy a good
Oh, sure.
humble.
Sure, yeah. I mean, well, yeah. We all love each other as people, but it's sport hate that makes the world go round,
And like I'll say too, right? So obviously, I mean, I'm not like as in the trenches with fans, of course, but I do see certainly all that sort of thing. But I remember hearing after the game from some of my UCF people, like people who are a bit more around that program, and they're just like, man, like Baylor's obviously not very good this year, but they just are bigger, man. Like it's like these Big 12 teams are just bigger. Like we felt like we recruited and developed well, but I think this would have been, if this game had gone through, the first win by one of the new teams against one of the old teams. Obviously that didn't happen. And That's true. I think that so obviously UCF goes on to beat Oklahoma State. I feel like I'm forgetting one more, but it was really one or two games were the only ones that the newcomers won against the old guard, I guess you'd say. So it's I think there were a lot of dynamics around this game too that ultimately made it really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Clint Moses, he literally just said it in the chat that UCF, I mean, they really stood out as the best of the new four that came in. They really stepped up compared to Cincinnati, BYU, and Houston. Jackson brings up something interesting here. Funny thing was, 2 days before the Baylor and UCF game, Malzahn got a contract extension from UCF, which makes this even more hilarious. I didn't even know that happened.
Yeah, no, I remember that, and like I think it was the right decision. He was actually very poorly paid relative to Big 12 coaches coming up, so he more got his like we're in the Big 12 now extension than anything else. Especially he was still getting paid off his Auburn buyout at the time, so he was making something like $2 million as a Big 12 coach. So like they don't regret it, to be clear, but at the same time it was pretty funny, just the timing of it all, and any good vibes about the extension immediately went away.
Yeah. We've already had our UCF night on the show, and there's a surprising amount of distrust of Gus Malzahn, and like, is this the guy of the future? And but yeah, very, very funny timing. Here's the game winner. And look at how empty that stadium is. Just absurd.
They literally all left.
They all went to Disney World, man.
Yeah, hey, why not, right? Why not if you can? Okay, so we're going to keep another Baylor game here, moving on to number 6. This one was wild. It was actually Drake Tolley who brought this up to me on Twitter, and I was like, oh, yeah, I'd forgotten about this game. West Virginia defeating Baylor 34-31. This one was a wild one, and maybe I should have this one a little bit higher on the list. What are y'all's memories of this game?
This is just another stupid game, man. Like this was just another ridiculous. I don't even know how to describe this one. Like there was no reason that Baylor should have been in this game at all, and it's interesting now, right? So Sam Kahn over at The Athletic did a great piece looking into Baylor, and basically what he reported is that Dave Aranda essentially made the pitch like, "Hey, don't fire me," before the game. Like on the Friday before the game. So like he already had kind of been looking for like assurance at the time to not be fired. And they go in and they play really well. And then they just completely collapse. It's crazy. This was such a weird game because it almost went off script for everybody, right? Like Baylor struggled to run the ball. West Virginia ran all over them, but kind of wasn't able to in key spots. And it ends up being a Jaheim White touchdown at the end that makes all the difference. So again, there's no reason that this game should have been this close. Actually, it's funny. I remember back, I think it was I can't remember if it was 2016 or Matt Rule's first season in 2017, but Baylor played on the road at West Virginia. And this was like 10-win West Virginia at the time. And Baylor had completely collapsed at that point. And they played them real close and had an onside kick opportunity to try it. And they didn't get it and they lost. And it was like, why was this game close? Like, I don't understand why this game was close. West Virginia won 9 games, but you just never know in the Big 12, man.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, so you're referencing it. Baylor comes back, makes it a game, and then West Virginia scores the game winner with 23 seconds left. Oh, man. Just wild. Just absurd. Brittany, what were you thinking about this one?
I believe I picked West Virginia to win this, obviously, because Baylor hadn't been doing well. West Virginia was kind of a weird team this year, but I trust the climb as much as you can trust the climb. I have faith in the West Virginians. So I think the right team won ultimately in this game. I mean, obviously Baylor came back to make it a close game, but I think it would have been another weird, you shouldn't have lost that game had Baylor won.
Yeah, we're definitely climb trusters here at the Biggest 12. I mean, Neil Brown, I think, more than has earned his continued job, right? Okay, yeah, and Tim brings up Baylor, 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns in this game, right? Just another
Not about that, yeah, because they put Richard Reese back there at kick returner, which they hadn't done all year long. They basically hadn't used Richard Reese at all for all of last year. That's, man, that feels like it was a million years ago.
honestly. Okay, so number 5 game, our first overtime game on the list. Oklahoma State barely squeaking by against BYU to punt. I think they had to win this game, if I remember correctly, to make sure that they made it into the Big 12 title game. But BYU gave them everything they could handle. It took 2 overtimes to win. What are y'all's thoughts on this one?
I mean, I'm glad that BYU hung on for most of the game, but I honestly was kind of surprised this last season that BYU was not as good as I thought they were going to be. They were, but I think I've said this on other shows too, including mine, and that BYU is very interesting because if you watch their people on Twitter during a game, you will think that they are losing by dramatic amounts. I mean, they're just criticizing, they're losing their minds, and half the time they're winning the game, just not by as many as they think they should be. They're all perfectionists. So I was glad for them that they at least, as we could see, it went into double overtime. They played well against one of the best teams in the Big 12. So I think that's how their fans were expecting that season to go, as opposed to some of the other games that didn't necessarily go their way.
Well, it was a ton of stakes in this game too, because BYU was fighting for a bowl game and Oklahoma State, it was hilarious timing. I believe Oklahoma had just won their last game. So it meant that Oklahoma State had to win this game to make the Big 12 title game. So both teams had a ton to play for. Both were playing very emotionally. And this was just like, I believe this was the game where Ollie Gordon kept going out with an injury and then coming back in and scoring touchdowns. Like, he finished with 5 touchdowns in this game. And again, it was hilarious too, because after Oklahoma State beat Oklahoma in their rivalry game, it was kind of like, oh, okay, so it's going to be Oklahoma State. They have such an easy pathway for the rest of the year. They just had to play UCF, Houston, and BYU, 3 newcomers. And they get boat raced by UCF. They don't play all that well against Houston. And then they have every opportunity to lose this game. And it was just like, I think that this in a lot of ways was the game too, that Ollie Gordon just wrapped up the Doak Walker Award as the best running back in college football. So it was 2 teams functioning at a really high level. And look, a lot of credit to Oklahoma State for making it happen.
Yeah. Hey, I want to apologize to everybody that had their stream interrupted. I think that it was because I was playing highlights. I was getting flagged by YouTube. So we won't play any more highlights for the sake of the stream getting interrupted. But yes, so welcome back. Oklahoma State defeated BYU 49-34 in double overtime. That's my number 5 game on the list. So thank you for hanging with us. Number 4 game on the list. And our last Baylor game on the list, and one that was a head scratcher from you, Shahan. Houston defeating Baylor in overtime, 25-24. I liked this one because Houston won it on a 2-point conversion in overtime. Maybe it's the old Gary Patterson fan of me. I'm a sucker for going for 2 on the road in overtime. What were y'all's thoughts on this game? Why do I have it too high, Shahan?
Well, I think that the ending of this game was great, right? Like the ending of this game with Houston going and of course forcing overtime. If I remember right, like Baylor needed a last-second touchdown just to force overtime. They end up scoring early in overtime. Houston comes back, wins the game. But like the rest, the game was just so poorly played. It was just such a poorly played game for the first 4 quarters of it. It was, I mean, most of the touchdowns, if I remember right, were chunk plays. Like they weren't necessarily like sustained drives, doing things at a high level. The quarterbacks combined for 3 interceptions, a lot of turnovers in this one. So I think that if you take it from like 2 minutes left in the game to the end of overtime, I think that it makes sense to have it really high. But boy, oh boy, that first little while was very weird. Now, again, this is another one of those games where there was just a lot riding on it. Baylor and Houston were supposed to play back in 2020 during the pandemic season, and Baylor had to pull out because of some COVID issues at the time. Remember that? Oh my gosh, when we were just canceling games left and right. But Houston talked a lot of trash about it, about the fact that that Baylor pulled out of the game. They were scared to compete because they had the deadly virus or whatever. But I think that I think that for Houston and Dana Holgorsen, and this is going to be a theme, of course, as we go further up on your list. Like if you give Dana Holgorsen a grudge, he's going to make something happen, right? Like he's going to make something happen. And even on that note, one game that you didn't have on this list, and I understand why because of who won it, but like West Virginia, Texas, man, that was a crazy finish. They should have won that game. It was so close to pulling what would have been a monumental upset in college football.
You think of Houston, Texas, right?
Houston, Texas. What'd I say?
Yeah, you said West Virginia, Texas, but yes, Houston, Texas. Yes.
Damn, Dana Holgorsen all in my head.
Yeah.
I don't know where you can't be too careful. He could be anywhere, but Houston, Texas. If Houston had beaten Texas, I don't want to say that Dana Holgorsen definitely would have been back. But I think if he gets West Virginia, Texas, and Baylor all in the same year,
it would be hard to fire him around another year. Yeah, for sure. And that would be so frustrating for Houston fans too. They would have driven them crazy. But yeah, I mean, Brittany, did you have any thoughts on this one? Did you catch this one live?
I did. My thing with this one is, I'm not the biggest Houston fan. I don't think this should be number 4. I don't. They're both bad teams, so either team winning, it's kind of like a nah, whatever. But on games that make you smile, I love when Baylor loses.
Sorry, you're surrounded by haters, Shahan.
I mean, it's how I live, man. It's how I live.
Okay, so these top 3 should be like universally agreed upon, I feel like, especially if we're keeping like Texas, Kansas State out of it. So my number 3 game, and this is where you get to be happy, Brittany, is Kansas having a total scoreboard over Oklahoma, beating the Sooners 38-33. We got Devin Neal diving across the goal line there at the end of the game. Let's talk about this one. Let's talk about Kansas, Oklahoma.
This was great because I think up until this game, a lot of KU people were like, "Oh, we're gonna have a great season. We're gonna be amazing this year," and everybody else is kind of like, we'll see. You guys aren't that good. You guys kind of suck." And then this game happened, right? And it's OU. That's a big deal to knock off OU, especially in the final you're playing them. I think this game, and I believe up until this game, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't OU undefeated? I think they were.
I think so. I'd have to double check. Let me see.
And so for
they
them,
were. Yeah, they were.
Yes, they were. Yeah.
For KU to come in and do that to Oklahoma, especially when they're undefeated, last time they're playing a team that doesn't have a great history of being good, but is on their way up against a team that's been in the college football playoffs multiple times. It was a big deal. I mean, I think it finally showed people that KU was good this year and to actually be taken seriously this year.
Do you know off the top of your head the last time that Kansas beat Oklahoma? Do you know what year that was?
It was
off the top of my head, no, but I can see my friend Winsipedia here. I can see what they think.
It's 1997.
Oh my gosh.
Kansas had
when TCU was wearing this helmet.
So Kansas
Nice
had
cheese.
never beaten Oklahoma in the BCS era or the national championship game era at all. The last time that Kansas beat Oklahoma, we were deciding national champions by AP poll. That's how long it's been.
Man. And now eternal scoreboard. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
Right?
No, it was funny with this Oklahoma team because I just watched them, man, and I'm like, their record is they're 7-0. They had a great start. They had some big performances. Honestly, the Iowa State one, right? They just like kind of got rolling, and I think it ended up being 50-20 at the end of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But they played some games that had no business being closed. They arguably should have lost to UCF the week before that, right? They let up a huge comeback. And it just felt like their luck was going to run out at some point. Now, it actually, these games, the Kansas game and the Oklahoma State game were back to back. So it kind of like all collapsed right in the same moment. But I think that when you talk about this, right, like, there was the 4th down conversion near the end of this game against an Oklahoma defense that was playing really well at that point. You talk about the way that they ran the ball. And by the way, they didn't get like, I think that there's it's one thing to get a perfect game and just like a confluence of events where everything goes right, every break goes your way. Kansas didn't play that game. Right, like they threw 2 interceptions in this game. They were pretty ineffective in the passing game overall, but this was just a Devin Neal special. Of course, 112 yards on the day. Jason Beat with a couple big runs as well. And so to come away at the end, to come from behind, to ultimately win this game and send Oklahoma not just out of the Big 12 with a loss, but of course put their spot in the Big 12 title game at that point, kind of up for grabs in a lot of ways, was huge. And I think that, again, this is going to be one of those Kansas games that's talked about for years and years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this is
you're
going to
so
be
right.
It's going to be similar to the time where Kansas had no business beating Texas, and they did.
Which time?
The last time with the fullback.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Kansas actually beat Texas twice, if I remember right.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
These
are the things we like to remember on the biggest. Okay. All right. I want to be conscious of time because I know we're coming up on. I told you 45 minutes, Shahan, and we're coming up on it. So number 2, Snowmageddon, Farmageddon in the snow. I mean, this probably would top a lot of people's list. Iconic setting, a rivalry that has gotten so much more competitive in recent years. It's so fun to watch. Iowa State defeating Kansas on the big Abu Sama run there, 42-35. Now we're going to have it in Ireland next year, right? Last time there was a Farmageddon in Ireland, there was a massive immigration crisis, actually. A lot of people don't remember that. But, what do y'all think about this game? Thank you, Shahan.
Well, first of all, you said Iowa State beating Kansas. They did not beat Kansas, beating Kansas State. Let's get that correction out of the way. Second of all, the pictures from this game were phenomenal. I mean, this was just a picture-perfect game. It was so cool. Even if you didn't have a team playing this game was so much fun to watch. I love that they're putting it in Ireland next year, although my only critique would be I think it's stupid that they got rid of it as a protected rivalry game and yet think it's big enough to send overseas, and also taking that away from a lot of the fans that can go to it by putting it overseas. But I do think it's kind of cool. I think that if you're going to say it's good enough for Ireland, you should keep it as a protected rivalry.
Yeah. This game, again, is just one of those that you just look over and you're like, what on earth is going down? Let me read the lengths of Iowa State's touchdowns in this game. Yeah. 71 yards, 77 yards, 79 yards, 60 yards, 33 yards, slacking that one, 82 yards. Like, they created nothing with any consistency the entire day. Like nothing. They had no down-to-down success. They kept getting pushed off the field. But like Abu Sama, like you mentioned, I just had 3 breakaway touchdowns. They have a breakaway passing touchdown as well. There's just no reason that this should have happened. And this is honestly a big trend with some of the best Big 12 games of the year, is that you just look up and you're like, why did that happen? What is going on? And I think that for Iowa State, Like it was just unbelievable. Like you said, the pictures coming from this game were crazy. These two teams hate each other a lot. I think that in a lot of ways, these are kind of, I mean, they're peers in a way, right? They want to do things a certain way. They kind of want to take up a similar spot in the Big 12. Matt Campbell had built a monopoly around it for a couple of years. Chris Kleiman comes in, knocks him off his perch a little bit. But like, again, people forget Iowa State started 1-2 last year after losing to Ohio, and they finished 6-3 in conference play and returned the most production in the Big 12 this upcoming year. So this was just, they're going to be a big problem. And so this was just one of those games where it was like, I think that it was great at the time, but let's say that Abu Sama is able to leverage this into being like a really complete running back next year. He has to be more than just a breakaway guy, by the way. That is, I think, my big question about Iowa State next year. But if Iowa State is able to go and take a big leap next year, I think we're going to be looking back and saying it started in this game.
Yeah. Look at you, sports journalist. Amazing. Okay. So we'll go on to number one now. Timothy Green called it in the chat. Come on, people. For me, there's only one answer for the best game of the year. It may not have had the pomp and circumstance around it that Farmageddon did, but this game was wild. Houston defeating West Virginia on the tipped Hail Mary, 41-39. Immediately after Houston had a shocking game winner. I wish I could be showing highlights for this. I'm so devastated that YouTube is the copyright, cops out there. But let's talk West Virginia, Houston. Dana Holgorsen swan song.
This was great. I was in North Carolina for a wedding, watching the ending of this game on a laptop in my hotel room. I tweeted something mocking Houston in favor of West Virginia. Then all of a sudden got flooded with tweets laughing at me, and quickly realized I probably should have shut my mouth and got blamed for West Virginia losing this game.
Yeah, the climb was not trusted.
No, this just felt like one of those games, and West Virginia had a great start to the year, of course. This felt like one of those games where Neil Brown just did not realize what was about to happen, right? Like, did not realize that he's not planning for a football game. Like, Dana Holgorsen just brought a flamethrower and is trying to set the stadium on fire, because if he doesn't win this game, the entire place is coming down with him anyway. Who cares? And so it was just the finish, especially, of course. Like, I mean, it was a great game throughout, but that fourth quarter, I mean, heading into the fourth quarter, it was 21-17, and the game ends 41-39 after 2 touchdowns in the last 12 seconds of the game. That's unbelievable. And again, I think that, like we talked about with that Baylor West Virginia game, I think sometimes endings can be a little bit can sometimes sneak up on you and make it a game feel better. This felt like one of those games that was back and forth. There were multiple lead changes in this game. They scored in different kinds of ways. We got a kick return touchdown in this game. We got passing and rushing touchdowns in this game. It was the whole package. And the other thing that was great about this game too, and of course West Virginia ended up being much better than we thought. I know one thing that was mentioned before was, like, when it's two teams that aren't very relevant playing, that can put a bit of a damper on it, but that just made this game feel even more important in some ways, right? Like, when you have two teams who don't have a lot else going on, or especially at the time we didn't know whether West Virginia did, it means that they're fighting with knives for like a fourth win, right? Like they're out here trying to make.
This is why we love college football.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this was just a quintessential college football game.
Yeah, I feel like this game to me is like the old Bill Hader sketch from Saturday Night Live. This game has everything, right? It has kick return touchdowns. It has 2 game winners, right? Like an insane amount of scoring in the fourth quarter. Beautiful, beautiful game. And again, sorry to West Virginia fans, but it was magnificent. So to round things out here and to bring us home, and Jahan, you can jump off if you got to. I totally understand. Are you good for now?
I'm good.
You're good. Okay, cool. So here again, you're all degenerates like me. Maybe you like to fire up an old game on YouTube to get you through the summer drought. I have selected one game for each of the Big 12 teams and one for each of the 4 incoming teams that you should rewatch from this past season to, make you feel good about yourself and your team going into this next year. So we'll go in alphabetical order. Yeah, sound good? First game, Baylor. You got to watch that UCF game again. Yes? Do you agree?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Hands down. Right. Okay, BYU. Who do you think my pick is for BYU?
Do they play Utah or sorry,
They
no
did not
way.
play Utah last year.
They did not play Utah last year. That's right. We talked about one, didn't we? I've already forgotten this.
The OU game.
Arkansas.
Oh yeah, the OSU.
Oh.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they won at Arkansas. Now, Arkansas didn't end up being all that good, but it's a 38-31 win. It's an exciting game, and, you know, everybody loves to win and beat an SEC team on the road. So, yeah, if I'm a BYU fan, I'm firing up that Arkansas game again. I mean, am I wrong?
I think I'd just pick a different season.
Well, yeah. So that's, well, as I was looking at TCU, I'm like, I don't know. Like, let's just go back to 2022. Let's not watch any of these games again. Like, good grief. Okay, Cincinnati's in a similar boat. Had to go out of conference for this one. But if you're a Cincinnati fan, rewatch that Pittsburgh game, man. Come on. That Pittsburgh rivalry, and that ended up being a pretty good game. It was a 27.
And we didn't know that Pitt was garbage yet.
Yeah, we didn't know that yet. But, you know, Cincinnati wins that killer trophy that's like the riverboat like power thing. Y'all seen that they play for? You know what I'm talking about? Am I talking into the void?
I don't. I'll have to look it up after this.
Yeah, it's insane. It's literally like this giant, you know, like power wheel for a riverboat. It's got like Cincinnati on one side and Pitt on the other side, and they like, you know, move it to whoever won. Anyway, it's cool. I love college football rivalry trophies. They're all ridiculous. Houston, duh. You gotta watch the West Virginia game again. I mean, you know, there wasn't a lot of high points last year, but this one was the highest of high points. We just talked about it. And again, the other one we just talked about, if you're an Iowa State fan, what are you rewatching?
The Kansas State game, of course.
Kansas State.
Yeah, that Kansas State game. Obviously, yes. Snowmageddon. I mean, I'm probably going to rewatch that game. Let's be honest. Kansas, again, an obvious one. What are you rewatching, Brittany?
The OU one.
Yes, the OU game. There he is, Devin Neal, diving across the goal line. 38-33 Kansas. Now, my Kansas State pick might be controversial, okay? I mean, okay, if it's y'all, what game are you rewatching this summer if you're a Kansas State fan?
I mean, the Kansas game is up there probably.
Yeah, yes.
That's what I was going to say, but they didn't necessarily – I don't think that was their best game, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's an objectively good game, you know. I mean, maybe if you're the sort of person who holds a grudge against TCU for theoretically injuring all of your players in 2022, maybe you rewatch the blowout against TCU. But for me, if I'm a Kansas State fan, I got to rewatch the most glorious bowl game in the history of corporate bowl games. I'm rewatching the Pop-Tart Bowl, man, for this moment alone, for nothing else, right? See, the future quarterback of my school devour the Pop-Tart mascot after a victory on the field. I mean, come on.
I do have to say, so I had coincidentally around that time had like a bit of a like health emergency. So I was like I wasn't watching college football. I was away from my phone, all this sort of stuff. And I came back a day later and my entire Twitter timeline is pictures of Chris Kleiman with a Pop-Tart. I'm like, what is going on? So that's why I didn't remember it off the top of my head, because I was not like a cognizant person while this went on. And I just like woke up and I'm like, why is Kansas State the team that this is happening to out of all the teams in the world?
Yeah.
I still am under the firm belief that the Pop-Tart should be on the cover of College Football 25. I don't care that it happened last year. It should be on the cover.
With holding his little sign descending into the toaster, right? Yes, that should be. You're 100% right. Okay, Oklahoma State. This is another gimme. What are you rewatching?
Bedlam.
Yes,
Bedlam.
Rewatching Bedlam. There you go. The best in Oklahoma there on the back on the screen. Okay, so TCU. Again, I had a hard time here. I was like, okay. I was thinking about maybe the BYU game. That's kind of Josh Hoover's coming out party. But at the end of the day, you know, any Saturday that Baylor loses is a good Saturday, right, Shahan?
I figure that's where you were going with this. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, we got to watch the what apparently some are calling the Blue Bonnet Battle, but we don't call it that around these parts.
I
The
don't know who those
Revivalry.
people are.
Yeah, we're gonna watch the Revivalry again, and those questionable uniforms. But hey, it's not a close game. Go ahead, Brittany.
Honestly, for TCU too, I believe you guys lost this game. Maybe you won. I don't even remember.
We won 42-17. We won this game.
The Colorado game was
yeah.
really, really, really good.
I ain't watching that. No.
Yeah, it is. I want to be very clear that it is specifically Clint's fault and TCU's fault that we're still talking about Colorado right this second. If they take care of business, then I don't have right now. Actually, somebody in my mentions complaining that I'm too low on Colorado, which happened 3 minutes ago off a video that was posted 2 days ago.
Yeah, that's truly our bad. That is truly our bad. Yeah, and we're gonna be paying for it for probably a good long while. So Texas Tech. This is where hey, if I'm a Texas Tech fan, yes, I have the Kansas game in my top 10, but if I'm a Texas Tech fan, there's only one game I'm rewatching. This is this game right here. Right? When the Possums stormed the field and led the Red Raiders to victory, they reclaimed the saddle in the Battle of West Texas. I mean, honestly, I might even rewatch this game. Even though TCU lost, this one was just quintessential college football to me.
The memes were great.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, UCF, and you mentioned this one earlier, Shahan. If you're a UCF fan, what are you rewatching?
You're watching Oklahoma State forget they're playing football.
Yeah, exactly, right? Not a close game, but something that I feel like if you're a UCF fan, you're just going to delight in, right? Watching Ollie Gordon get completely stymied. Yeah, you said it. Oklahoma State forget how to play football and lose 45-3 as they're on the cusp of, going to the Big 12 title game. And West Virginia.
Get the space uniforms.
Yeah, the space uniforms. What do y'all think about the space uniforms, by the way? Yay or nay?
I like them.
I love them. Yeah. I think that it makes a lot of sense, and the ties make sense. When you kind of look into it and learn the history of UCF and their connection to Cape Canaveral and all that, it does actually make sense.
Yeah. So West Virginia, I kind of went back and forth on. I considered the TCU game just because that kind of got them rolling, and they, we missed 2 or 3 field goals, something stupid in that game, and it was a close game. But ultimately, I think for entertainment value, I think it's the Baylor game that you rewatch if you're a West Virginia fan. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I think that's definitely up there in terms of the games that they should watch. I mean, I think that they felt really good about what happened against Pitt, but obviously Pitt again ended up being garbage, which we didn't know at the time. So in terms of the actual best watchability game, I think that Baylor is probably the right pick.
I agree.
All right. So now on to our 4 new members, the former Pac-12 members. Arizona, again, I kind of went back and forth. I'm like, do you watch Oregon State? Do you watch one of these other games? I think if I'm an Arizona fan, I would rewatch the Alamo Bowl. I mean, I know Oklahoma didn't have all of their guys, but you just go out there, you make a statement win, 38-24. It's kind of a, almost like a welcome to the Big 12 thing as well. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Agreed. That's a good win.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they came so close to having 2 other signature wins with Washington and USC, but I think that what they did to Oklahoma, the stage that they did, and how dominant they were in that game, I think that they're going to remember that for a while.
Yeah. Now, Arizona State didn't have a lot to choose from, but unfortunately, I do love all the new Sun Devil folks I've met. I absolutely love. But I feel like if I'm an Arizona State fan, I'm going to get a lot of delight out of rewatching beating UCLA on their way out the door to the Big Ten, 17-7 in the Rose Bowl. What do y'all think about that one?
This is actually the team that I use my go watch another season card, because oh boy, this was not this was not the greatest season in Arizona State history. But if you have to pick a game, if you're required to pick a game, I think it's probably UCLA.
And I'll say, even picking another season, there aren't that many to choose from. They've had a lot of bad ones recently.
That is true. Okay, Colorado. Here's your
TCU
mix.
game.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. Right. Yes.
I mean, the Colorado State game too. That one was pretty crazy.
That was a crazy game. Yes, that was a crazy game. But I feel like this got the hype train rolling. They didn't look particularly good in the Colorado State game, I didn't think. And also,
they didn't.
I mean, TCU was a better opponent.
Not a lot better.
Well, yeah. Let's be real. Marginally better. 45-42. TCU throws several red zone interceptions. Travis Hunter played out of his mind in this game. Definitely if you're a Colorado fan, I think you're rewatching this one. And finally, last but not least, Utah. You got to rewatch that USC game. Okay, beating Caleb Williams, sending USC out of the Pac-12 with a loss one last time. So what are we feeling, y'all? You think this is a pretty solid lineup?
I do. I'm glad you ended up including that Colorado game. It was good. It was also the start of the season, so it was like everybody was hungry for good football. It was the first really good game, and it honestly, to be fair, when TCU lost, I was like, it didn't look that bad. It got worse.
Didn't feel that.
Colorado continued to be bad the rest of the year. I mean, I think everybody kind of thought Colorado was going to be this huge team. So when they beat TCU, it wasn't entirely shocking. But then when they kind of turned out to just be a dud, it made that game look even worse. But it was really fun for the time being.
Oh yeah. I mean, I feel like if I was a rational human being, a rational thinking human being, not a TCU fan, I feel like we're like, oh, this game was a blast, right? I mean, there is like the curse of Deion Sanders now being on all of our screens constantly, but it was beyond frustrating to watch. Just the interceptions, the defense was playing, there was no discernible scheme, and our receivers were playing 10 yards off the ball, our corners were playing 10 yards off the ball when it was 3rd and short. It's just stupid stuff. It
is funny, right? Because like, I was at that game. I was in the press box for that game. I was in Deion Sanders' post-game press conference, which obviously got a little bit of attention after that one. But I remember at halftime, because I still was like, whoa, this is happening, but not really. Obviously, TCU is going to pull away. And I was talking to a University of Colorado staffer, like somebody who works in their athletic administration, and he, even during that first, I was like, yeah, that was great, that was fun. I didn't really know what to expect, and it was a lot of fun. And I don't think that he had any idea of what was about to happen to the program, to the attention they were about to get, the sort of national thing that was about to happen. The thing that I've said so much of the time is that Colorado is less of a football story and more of a celebrity story. And I don't think we realized what we were about to see happen.
Yeah, true. Well, y'all, Shahan, Brittany, thank you so much for hanging out and, indulging me and going through the list and all of this. Please plug your stuff. Tell the people where they can find you. Anything you want to throw out there. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll jump in. You can find me on Twitter at Shahan J. Raj. Actually, you can find me on basically every social media platform, Shahan J. Raj. It's a pretty easy handle to get, thankfully. And you can find all my work at cbssports.com. You can listen to my podcast, The College Football Survivor Show, as well. And yeah, we have our annual coach rankings coming out, so make sure to check out where all of the Big 12 coaches will be.
Where do you have Sonny Dykes?
He is in the top 25, I believe. So he is. No, I
Big 12 coaches.
I'll need to glance where I think he's he's 3 or 4. He's pretty high still. Now I will say we
I thought you were saying Big 12 coaches. Yeah, he's in the top 25.
I will say I was having this conversation with somebody, and it's like Sonny Dykes about to go into kind of his 2023 Dave Aranda year, where he gets the mulligan, but now if he has a bad year, he's gonna fall 30 spots. I don't think it'll happen, but it's a big year for him coming up.
Go ahead, Brittany.
And then you can find me on Twitter I actually switched it, so my handle is slightly different than this now. It's it's Brittany Rose. So I did switch it. And then you can also find my podcast at Big 12 After Dark. We'll be probably picking that up middle summer. You can come join our Twitter spaces and interact with us and join in on the conversation. It's more of a relaxed conversation with just everybody on there. And then if you like following dogs and you like Texas Tech or any type of Texas professional team sports, you can follow Waffles at Waffles Reckham.
The true Twitter celebrity. Yes.
He's much more popular than me, it's true.
Well, thank y'all so much again. Thanks everybody else for tuning in. Thank you for bearing with me through my copyright infringement. And next week is up in the air. Follow me on Twitter to make sure that you know what's happening with the show next week. There's so much end of the year school stuff. I'm trying to ascertain as to whether or not I'll actually be able to do the show. Please do follow us at Big 12 Voice of College Football right here. Subscribe, like, do all of the things, and follow me on Twitter at Clint_Foster55 and at Clint Foster Comedy on YouTube. Until next time, I hope your team wins. Love y'all. And go Big 12. See you around.